My name is Claire Matthews. I'm 31 years old. I teach art at a quiet high school just outside Boston. My life was peaceful, simple, even invisible, until the moment I got engaged to the love of my life. His name is Lucas. We'd been together for nearly 5 years. He made me feel seen, like I wasn't just Chloe's older, duller sister. He proposed at a little art gallery where we had our first date. I cried. I said yes. And for the first time in my life, I believed this moment, this celebration, would be mine. I had no idea that my own mother would be the one to take it away. My mom, Eileen, has always been obsessed with appearances. In her world, family is a showcase, a perfect image to impress outsiders. I, the quiet one with modest clothes and a soft voice, never fit that image. Chloe, on the other hand, she was everything my mother adored. Chloe is 27, blonde, stunning, full of energy, with hundreds of thousands of followers online. She models part-time, has brand deals, goes to red carpets and brunches with people who wear sunglasses indoors. In my mom's eyes, Chloe is a golden child, a star, the pride of the family, she always says. I was just the background, the frame around the masterpiece. Still, I never resented Chloe. I just wanted for once to be chosen, to be celebrated. I thought my wedding would be that moment, but I was wrong. 3 weeks before the big day, Mom invited me over for a quick talk. I brought Lucas with me. I thought she just wanted to ask about centerpieces or seating charts, but the moment we walked in, I felt the tension. She sat perfectly upright, a cup of tea in her hand, eyes calm and cold. Chloe was there too, lounging in silk pajamas, glowing even without makeup. Before I could even sit down, Mom said, "Claire, I've thought about this carefully, and I believe it's best if you postpone your wedding." I froze. "Excuse me." Her tone didn't change. Chloe just got engaged, and she and Evan would like to have their wedding on the same date you chose, June 12th. I stared at them both. I felt the blood rush out of my face. "That's my wedding date." Chloe gave a soft, apologetic smile. "I didn't mean to overlap, sis. But you know, June 12th is Mom and Dad's anniversary. It's romantic, iconic." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom sipped her tea and said, "It would mean a lot if you could step back this once. Chloe's career is taking off. A wedding right now would be a huge opportunity. Think of the sponsors, the press." I turned to Lucas, who looked just as stunned as I was. Then I turned back to Mom. "I've spent months planning this. Every detail. I sent the invitations. I ordered the dress." "What are you asking me to do? To reschedule?" she said flatly. "You'll still get married, just at a later time. And if I say no?" She looked up at me with a familiar warning in her eyes, the one she always used when I dared question her. "Then your father and I won't be attending, and the rest of the family might feel torn." I swallowed back a lump in my throat. "You're blackmailing me." "I'm asking you to think of the bigger picture," she replied calmly. I looked at Chloe. "Do you even care?" She shrugged. "I care, but I also can't ruin everything I've built for one date. I love you, Claire, but this matters to me." Lucas stood and reached for my hand. "Let's go." I stood shaking. I looked around that room one last time. My mother didn't move. Chloe didn't look ashamed. And I realized something. I was never the daughter worth fighting for. We drove in silence. Not even the radio dared to fill the space between us. I stared out the window at the dark Boston skyline, blinking back tears I didn't want Lucas to see. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, but he never said a word, not until we pulled into the driveway of our small apartment. Inside, I dropped onto the couch like my bones had given up. Lucas sat beside me, gently took my hand, and whispered, "Claire, we can still get married that day. I don't care if it's in a backyard or a parking lot. I just want you." I nodded, but I didn't feel relief. I felt hollow. Because deep down, I realized this wasn't just about a wedding date. It was about being invisible, about living in the shadow of someone else's spotlight for 3 decades. I thought I'd finally stepped into my own story. But once again, someone else had taken the pen from my hand. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid awake, replaying every moment. Every time I had been the one to sacrifice. Every time Chloe didn't mean to overshadow me, and every time I let her. Like when she wore white to my college graduation because it made her tan pop. Or when she posted bikini photos from her latest vacation the same day I announced my job promotion, and suddenly all the comments were about her. And every time Mom would say she didn't do it on purpose. You're too sensitive, Claire. But this time was different. This wasn't a dress. This wasn't an Instagram post. This was my wedding. My future. My joy. And she had asked me to hand it over for likes for attention for Chloe. No, not this time. The next morning, I called Mom. I'm not postponing my wedding, I said, voice steady. Silence. Then she sighed. Claire, don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm not making it hard. I'm standing up for myself. You're being selfish, she snapped. You know Chloe's wedding will be televised. It could help her land a national campaign. That kind of exposure doesn't come twice. And my happiness, I asked. Does that come twice? She didn't answer. You've made your choice, she finally said. And so have I. Click. She hung up. Lucas wrapped his arms around me when I told him. Let them be angry, he whispered. Let them miss what they never valued. We decided not to change the date. We wouldn't compete with Chloe, we wouldn't stoop to games. But we would hold on to what was ours. Still, I was afraid. Afraid of being alone on what should have been the happiest day of my life. Afraid that no one would come. That people would pick the wedding with the flashier lights and the fancier venue. And then something unexpected happened. 3 days later, Chloe posted her wedding announcement online. A glossy photo of her and Evan holding hands in front of a white gazebo. The caption read, Save the date, June 12th, Dark Sea Forever. Within hours, the messages started pouring in. Not for her, for me. Friends, old classmates, even colleagues I hadn't spoken to in years messaged, Wait, isn't that your wedding date? Claire, are you okay? This feels off. I'm on your side. Let me know how I can help. I had never felt so seen. So I decided to speak. I wrote a post, simple, honest. To everyone wondering, yes, June 12th is my wedding date. I chose it first. I won't explain further, but I will say, this love isn't a performance. It's not a campaign. It's not something you steal. My wedding will happen, with or without glitter, with or without applause. But it will be full of love. And everyone who wants to celebrate that love is welcome. It went viral. Thousands of shares, hundreds of messages of support. People saw through the illusion, and they rallied behind authenticity. Mom didn't call. Chloe sent me a one-line text, really classy, Claire. Way to make this about you. I didn't reply. For once in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I wasn't shrinking anymore. A week passed. The air between me and my family turned from cold to frozen. No calls, no visits. Even extended family members, uncles, aunts, cousins, began to pick sides quietly. Some messaged me with vague apologies. We love you, Claire, but we already RSVP'd to Chloe's. Others just stayed silent. But the thing about silence, it speaks louder than words. I busied myself with last-minute wedding preparations. Lucas and I decided to downscale everything. The fancy ballroom was gone canceled. Instead, we found a cozy outdoor venue with a small garden, fairy lights, and enough space for the people who truly wanted to be there. Lucas handled most of it. I didn't have the heart. My chest still felt heavy like grief, because that's what it was, grieving the family I thought I had. Until something changed. It started with a knock on the door. When I opened it, I gasped. It was my father. He stood there, suit slightly wrinkled eyes, tired. A bouquet of hydrangeas in one hand, my favorite. He gave a weak smile. I figured I should finally act like a father, he said softly. I stepped aside without a word. Let him in. He sat down on the couch, exhaled deeply, then looked me straight in the eyes. Claire, I'm sorry. I've let your mother run everything for so long. I forgot I had my own voice. I should have stood up for you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Why didn't you? He looked down. Because it was easier. Because I thought keeping peace meant keeping quiet. But I saw that post you wrote, and I realized I haven't really been there for you, not since you were a little girl painting in the backyard with glitter in your hair. A tear slipped down my cheek. I remembered that girl. I missed her. He continued, I don't know if I can fix everything, but I'd like to walk you down the aisle if you'll still let me. My heart cracked open. I nodded slowly. That one gesture, not grand, not dramatic, meant more than all the staged perfection my mother chased. In the days leading up to the wedding, something magical happened. People began to show up. Friends I hadn't seen in years offered to help set up. Colleagues brought flowers. A former student offered to photograph the wedding for free. Even my neighbor, the grumpy one with 5 cats, volunteered to string fairy lights. It wasn't about luxury anymore. It was about love and choice. The night before the wedding, I sat with Lucas on our small balcony watching the stars. I used to think my family defined me, I said. That if they didn't approve, I must be doing something wrong. Lucas took my hand. You know what I see? A woman who finally chose herself. That's the bravest thing anyone can do. I kissed him. And tomorrow, I get to choose you in front of everyone. He smiled. Even if no one shows up, it'll still be perfect. But deep down, I knew. People would come. Maybe not all. Maybe not who I once begged for. But the right ones would. And that was enough. June 12th arrived. I stood in front of the mirror wearing a simple ivory dress. No designer label, no beading, just soft flowing fabric and a ribbon of satin tied at my waist. My heart pounded. My father stood outside the door waiting. I took one last deep breath. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let anyone steal it again. The garden was glowing. Twinkling lights danced in the branches of trees, and gentle music flowed from the string quartet Lucas's cousin had gathered at the last minute. Rows of white chairs were neatly arranged, some already filled with warm, familiar faces, friends, mentors, even a few extended relatives who had changed their minds at the last second. I stood just behind a vine-covered archway, heart hammering like it wanted to leap out of my chest. My father looked at me, his expression soft, as if seeing me for the first time in years. You ready? He asked. I smiled. I've never been more ready for anything. The music swelled, the doors opened, and I stepped into my own story. Gasps rippled through the crowd, not because of glamour or extravagance, but because for once I was at the center, and I was glowing. Not from makeup, but from freedom. As we walked down the aisle, I spotted Lucas waiting for me. He looked proud, not just of me, but of the journey we had taken together. The battles we had fought, the tears I had shed, the growth I had earned. When my father placed my hand into Lucas's, he whispered, You've always deserved this, Claire. I was just too blind to see it. And then he stepped back, tears shining in his eyes. The ceremony was simple, beautiful, honest. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves. Lucas spoke first. Claire, from the moment I met you, I knew you were different. Not because you tried to stand out, but because you didn't. You saw others. You gave without asking. You loved without needing praise. Today, I want to honor that kind of love, the kind that stays even when the world forgets you. And I said, Lucas, you saw me when no one else did. When I thought I had to shrink to fit, you reminded me I could expand. You loved me for my quiet, not in spite of it. And with you, I've learned that I don't need permission to matter. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. We sealed it with a kiss. The applause was thunderous, not staged, not recorded, not rehearsed, just real, alive. But the real twist came minutes later. While we were taking photos in front of the fountain, one of Lucas's friends rushed up to us, phone in hand. Claire, you might want to see this. He turned the screen toward me. It was a live stream, Chloe's wedding, and it was chaos. Apparently, the influencer couple had tried to throw an extravagant rooftop wedding in New York City, designer everything celebrity guests, full camera crews. But right as they were about to begin, the building received a sudden evacuation notice due to a gas leak on the lower floors. Everyone had to leave. In the confusion, the live stream caught everything Chloe's panic. Evan shouting at the venue manager, a bridesmaid crying about her ruined dress. But the comment section was worse. People were turning. Hundreds of viewers wrote things like, "Didn't she steal her sister's wedding date? Claire deserves better. Karma came to the party. This is what happens when you prioritize clout over love." I stood there stunned. Lucas gently took the phone from me and turned it off. "You didn't need revenge," he whispered. "The universe did it for you." That night, our reception was held under the stars. There was dancing, laughter. My father gave a speech awkward and full of dad jokes. I cried. Lucas's mom pulled me into a hug and said, "Thank you for choosing love over spectacle. You remind me of what weddings are really about." And as I looked around at the people who had shown up not for a spectacle, but for us, I finally understood. I had spent my life trying to be accepted by the wrong people, trying to fit into a family image that was never built for me. But here on this imperfect, beautiful night, I had built something better. A family of choice, a moment of truth. And it was mine. The morning after our wedding, I woke up to birdsong and sunlight streaming through our bedroom window. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. Lucas was still asleep, his hand resting gently over mine. I studied his face, the peaceful curve of his mouth, and smiled. This was my husband. My husband. And for once, I wasn't waking up to anxiety or dread. There were no last-minute crisis calls from my mother. No texts from Chloe with passive-aggressive reminders about her big day. Just stillness, joy, belonging. I slid out of bed, wrapped myself in a robe, and padded to the kitchen. And then I saw it, my phone buzzing like it had a mind of its own. Notifications flooded the screen. Mentions, messages, missed calls, dozens of them. I opened one. "Claire, I just saw the clip from Chloe's wedding meltdown. Are you okay? You didn't deserve any of this." Another. "Girl, your vows were so pure and real." I cried. "Subscribe to your channel. Please, write a book." And another. "Your sister went full meltdown on live TV. Meanwhile, your wedding looked like a dream. I hope you know how many people are rooting for you now." I blinked. My wedding post, the one I had written from a place of exhaustion and hurt, had been shared by a few major pages overnight. People had started calling it the anti-influencer wedding. The hashtag #TroshChooseClaire was trending. For once, I wasn't the background character in Chloe's narrative. People were listening to me, seeing me. But more importantly, I didn't feel the need to perform anymore. Later that afternoon, I got a call from someone unexpected, my cousin Rachel. We hadn't been close growing up. She'd always been on Chloe's side, same school, same friend group, same bubble. "Claire," she said breathlessly, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I had no idea how bad things were. I thought you were exaggerating. But watching the way your mom treated you during all this, it was eye-opening." I was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for saying that." She added, "Honestly, your wedding made me rethink everything. I've been chasing a version of success that never felt like mine. But you looked truly happy." And just like that, a bridge that had been burned for years was rebuilt. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. Not a text, not an email. A handwritten letter from my mother. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page written in her familiar looping script. "Claire, I suppose there's no excuse that will undo the pain I've caused." Watching Chloe's wedding fall apart so publicly forced me to reflect on what really matters and what I've lost. I won't ask for your forgiveness, not yet, but I want you to know I am ashamed. I chose image over integrity, performance over presence, and I lost you in the process. If you're willing, I'd like to meet, not to defend myself, but to listen. Truly listen. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. I didn't know how to feel. A part of me still carried the hurt, the resentment, the disbelief that a mother could treat her own child as expendable. But another part, the woman I had become, knew the power of choice. Maybe she was trying. Maybe it was too late. I didn't decide that day. But I smiled, folded the letter, and placed it in my drawer. Progress didn't need to come all at once. Lucas and I spent the next week in Vermont in a quiet lakeside cabin loaned to us by his aunt. No Wi-Fi, no phones, just nature, firewood, and each other. One night, as we sat wrapped in blankets on the porch watching fireflies flicker above the water, Lucas turned to me and said, "You know the way everything unfolded? It was painful, yeah. But it also gave us this." This was more than just the cabin. It was freedom, clarity, the kind of love that doesn't need an audience. He was right, and I finally understood something profound. I had spent my life believing that family was something you owed everything to, that sacrificing yourself was noble, that being quiet and agreeable was what made you good. But now I saw the truth. Family doesn't mean giving up your voice. Love doesn't demand your silence. And peace comes when you stop begging to be seen and start choosing yourself. 3 weeks after the wedding, I got a call from someone I never expected, Chloe. Her name blinked on my screen like a ghost. After everything that had happened, I nearly let it go to voicemail. But something inside me said, "Pick up." "Claire." Her voice was soft, almost unrecognizable. "Can we talk?" "What about?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. "Everything," she whispered. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop we used to go to in high school. When I walked in, Chloe was already there. No full glam, no phone held up for selfies, just her in a hoodie hair and a messy bun, eyes rimmed with fatigue. "I messed everything up," she said before I even sat down. I eased into the chair across from her. "I'm listening." "The wedding?" Evan left. Said I didn't know how to be real, that everything was about image. I hate to admit it, but Mom pushed me into all of it. And I let her. "You didn't have to," I said calmly. "You made choices too." "I know." She blinked fast, trying to keep the tears back. "I was jealous, Claire. I always was. You never needed to be loud to be seen. I felt like I was always performing, and no one really cared." A strange ache tugged at my chest. For a moment, I saw her not as the golden child or the spotlight stealer, but as a girl lost in her own mirror. "You know something," I said gently. "I used to envy you too. You always had Mom's attention, the praise, the parties. But now I realize we were both trapped in the same script. You played the lead. I was cast as the extra. Maybe it's time we both rewrite the story." I walked out of that cafe feeling lighter, not because Chloe apologized, but because I no longer needed her to. I wasn't stuck in that old wound anymore. I had grown. The weeks that followed were filled with rebirth. I started writing, not for likes or validation, but to give voice to the ones who had been silenced like me. I wrote about daughters raised to serve women trained to shrink families that buried the quiet ones. I titled my first piece, "The Quiet One Speaks." I expected a few kind comments. Instead, it went viral. Messages poured in from strangers. "This is my story. You put into words what I've felt for years. I cried reading this. Thank you." I was invited to speak at women's events, community circles, even a few college campuses. And after every talk, Lucas would find me in the crowd, wrap his arms around me and say, "You were incredible." For the first time, I wasn't begging to be seen. I was simply standing tall. One afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. I didn't ignore it. "Claire," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I read your essay. I cried through the whole thing. I didn't say anything. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I'm seeing a therapist now. And if you'd allow it, I'd like to come to your next event. Not to speak, not to correct you, just to listen." I paused, then said, "All right, but really listen this time." The venue was a cozy, dimly lit theater with worn red curtains. As I walked onto the small stage, I scanned the front row, and there she was. My mother. No clipboard, no critiques, no cold stare. Just a woman sitting with her hands folded, eyes already misty. I cleared my throat, then spoke into the mic. I used to think love meant obedience, that being a good daughter meant silence. But I know now family doesn't mean losing yourself. There was a hush in the room. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop chasing approval and start choosing truth. I didn't speak with anger. I didn't speak to wound. I spoke because I could, and that was enough. After that night at the theater, I felt a strange peace settle over my life. It wasn't perfection. My mother and I weren't suddenly best friends. Chloe and I still had a long road to walk. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was living in a world I had built, not one I was trying to survive in. Lucas and I bought a small home on the edge of town. Nothing extravagant, just a little 2-bedroom cottage with wildflowers in the backyard and sun filtering through the kitchen window every morning. It was quiet. And it was ours. One morning, as I stood barefoot on the porch sipping tea, I opened my inbox and nearly dropped my cup. An editor from a major publishing house had emailed me. She had read The Quiet One Speaks. She wanted to talk about a book. The meeting was surreal. I sat in a sunlit corner of a bookstore cafe, across from a woman who had edited memoirs I'd once read with reverence. "We believe your voice is timely," she said. "Raw, unapologetic. You don't just tell your story, you awaken others to theirs." I blinked. "You think it's worthy of a book?" She smiled. "I think it's necessary." By the time I got home, Lucas had already lit candles and set out takeout sushi. He listened as I told him everything, nodding with that small, quiet pride he always carried. When I finished, he raised his glass. To the woman who stopped asking for permission and started telling the truth. We clinked glasses, and I felt tears sting my eyes. Months passed in a blur of writing and healing. The manuscript grew one chapter at a time. Chapter 1, The Cancellation. Chapter 2, The Spotlight That Wasn't Mine. Chapter 3, The Bride Who Never Was. Chapter 4, The Fire I Built Myself. Each word was a reclamation. Each page a wound stitched closed. The book released a year later. It wasn't a viral sensation. It wasn't on billboards. But it found its people. Book clubs, therapy offices, shelves in quiet homes where someone was ready to say me too. I received hundreds of letters. "Your story helped me confront my mother after 20 years. I canceled my wedding for my sister. Your words healed me. Thank you for reminding me that quiet doesn't mean weak." Every single one reminded me why I wrote it. Not for revenge, not for applause, but because truth, once spoken, frees others. Then came the invitation I never expected. A university wanted me to speak not just about the book, but to teach a course on storytelling and personal empowerment. I stood in front of a room full of students one chilly October morning, hands trembling slightly, heart pounding. "Welcome," I began. "I'm Claire. I was once told I didn't matter, that my voice was too small. But let me be the first to tell you, no voice is ever too small when it's your truth." The room was still. Then one by one they began to nod. At the end of that semester, I stood at my desk gathering papers when a young woman approached me. She held my book to her chest, eyes glassy. "Professor Matthews, your story saved me." I blinked back tears. "No, you saved you. I just told my truth." She smiled. "Then maybe I can tell mine too someday." That night, I came home and curled up with Lucas on the couch. The fire crackled softly. "You've changed so many lives," he whispered. I nestled closer. The biggest one was my own. Months passed. The book, the class, the speaking engagements. All of it felt like a dream I had never dared to imagine. But even as I found my own rhythm, there were echoes from the past that hadn't fully quieted. One evening, as the autumn leaves drifted across our front porch, I received a message I hadn't expected. From Evan. Yes, that Evan, Chloe's ex-fiancé. "Claire," it read, "I saw your interview last week. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything, for not speaking up, for letting it happen. I stared at the screen, unsure what I felt. Anger, closure, maybe both. He continued, Chloe told me everything about what happened before the wedding, about the pressure. I should have done more, but I was weak. I let your family ruin something good. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat with the words. Let them sit where they belonged in the past. A week later, I received another call that shook me more than Evan's message ever could. It was from my father. We hadn't spoken much since the wedding incident. He had mostly followed my mother's lead, silent approval of her decision's quiet retreat when conflict arose. But now his voice was different. Claire, he said, I owe you an apology. I held my breath. I read your book. Twice, he admitted. At first, I wanted to throw it across the room, but then I realized you weren't trying to hurt us. You were just telling the truth. I stayed quiet. Your mother and we failed you. I failed you. And if you'd let me, I want to be part of your life again. On your terms. I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to scream, now you see me. But another part, the one that had grown healed, forgiven, whispered, this is what you always wanted, not their approval, but their awareness. So I agreed to meet him. We met at a small diner, the kind with chipped mugs and servers who call you honey. He looked older than I remembered, not just in face, but in spirit. I don't expect a clean slate, he said as we sat. I just want to be your dad again, if you'll have me. I looked him in the eyes and said, you can't go back, but you can start over. He nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. That's all I ask. Over time, our relationship mended slowly, delicately, like glass being pieced back together. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkward silence, missteps, words that reopened wounds. But there was also effort, real effort. And in that I found peace. Then on a cold December morning, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in swirling cursive. Inside was a wedding invitation. Chloe. She was getting married to someone new. The invitation was soft gold, elegant, tasteful. And at the bottom, in her handwriting, Claire, I understand if you can't come. But it would mean the world if you did. I want to do this right. With you there. Love, Chloe. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I smiled a small, sad smile, because I realized something. She was finally stepping into her own story. And maybe, just maybe, I could witness it without carrying the pain. The night before Chloe's wedding, I stood in front of my closet staring at the navy blue dress I had picked. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dull. It was simply mine. Lucas walked in and wrapped his arms around me. You sure you want to do this? I nodded slowly. Yes, but I'm not going to perform. I'm going to witness. That's a big difference. He kissed my cheek. You're braver than anyone I know. The wedding was held in a cozy countryside vineyard. Unlike the extravagant event Chloe once planned with Evan, this one was soft, intimate, warm. No drones, no trending hashtags, no choreographed photo ops. Just a simple arch of flowers, close family and friends, and Chloe standing in the center of it all beaming. When she saw me arrive, her eyes widened. She broke from her line of bridesmaids and rushed toward me in her heels, dress bunched in her arms. Claire, she gasped. You came! I smiled gently. You invited me. She hesitated, then whispered, I don't deserve. I cut her off. You deserve a clean start, just like I did. She threw her arms around me, and for the first time in years, we hugged, not as rivals, not as daughters, pulled by expectations, but as sisters. The ceremony was beautiful. During her vows, Chloe glanced toward me with tears in her eyes. She spoke of learning to be real, of shedding past versions of herself, of finding love, not through perfection, but through truth. After the couple kissed and everyone applauded, Chloe grabbed the mic again. There's someone here who I owe everything to, she said. She showed me what real courage looks like. She lost more than any bride ever should, and still stood taller than anyone I know. She looked at me. Claire, thank you for giving me a second chance. A hush fell. Then the room erupted in gentle claps, and for a moment, a rare sacred moment, I felt completely seen. At the reception, I stood near the garden watching the fairy lights twinkle when my mom approached. She had aged too, but this time she didn't hide it with powder or forced smiles. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I nodded. "Thank you for not asking anything more of me," she swallowed. "I'm learning, Claire. Slowly, but I'm trying." For the first time, I believed her. I didn't forgive her on the spot, but I didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. That night back home, Lucas and I curled up with mugs of tea. "You were incredible today," he whispered. I rested my head on his shoulder. I wasn't incredible. I was just honest. "And that's enough." He nodded. "It always was." I looked at him, this man who had waited patiently while I unraveled and rebuilt myself. "You still want to marry me?" I asked, teasing. He chuckled. I never stopped. "We didn't plan a grand wedding. Just something simple. Us, a few close friends, and our promises. Because love, I learned, doesn't demand sacrifice. It invites you as you are." 1 year later, it was a crisp April morning when Lucas and I stood under an oak tree in the backyard of our home, sunlight streaming through the branches, petals from the blooming cherry trees, drifting gently around us like nature's confetti. There was no aisle, no planner, no performance, just love. I wore a simple white linen dress. He wore his favorite navy suit, slightly wrinkled from our last-minute hugs with guests. Our vows weren't memorized. They weren't perfect, but they were real. "I promised to choose you, not just on the good days," I said, voice shaking, "but when the storms come, when the noise returns, when the world says, 'We don't make sense,' I'll still be there." Lucas smiled, eyes wet. "I promise to always see you, Claire, not just as my wife, but as the woman who taught me how to fight with grace." And then we kissed. The crowd, about 30 of our closest friends, some family, some chosen family, erupted into soft cheers. Among them stood my dad, holding his camera with proud tears in his eyes. Chloe, arm in arm with her husband, smiled and winked. And behind them all was my mom. Not the domineering version of her I once feared, but someone changed. Someone softened. She didn't try to take over. She simply clapped, quietly, respectfully. And that was enough. That night, after everyone had left and we were alone under the stars, Lucas and I sat in our little garden. "Do you regret anything?" he asked softly, his arm around me. I thought for a moment. "I regret not choosing myself sooner," I whispered. "But maybe I had to lose everything to finally find my voice." He nodded. "You know, I said there was a time I thought love had to be earned, that if I wasn't perfect, I didn't deserve it." He leaned in. "And now I know love isn't a reward. It's a mirror. And I finally like what I see." Weeks later, a new email landed in my inbox. Another publisher, this time for fiction. They'd read my memoir and wanted to know if I had a novel in me. I smiled and typed yes. "I think I have a few." Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. Years from now, when someone asks how it all started, I'll tell them it began the moment I was told to cancel my wedding. And instead of breaking, I rebuilt. I chose my voice over their expectations, and it changed everything. Thank you for listening to my story. Maybe one day you'll tell yours too. And when you do, make sure you don't apologize for a single word.